His name, Divine Prospect. That gentleman is in question when it comes to Hebraic and Judaic studies, because I spoke to him several months ago, a long time, because I've been off this app for a minute, and he's under the impression that he has the authority and the right to develop his own halakha, which we just don't.
Oh, I forgot who you are. I know who you are now, but go ahead.
we go by what is taught to us by our elders and by our sages and by the Chachamim. And the truth be told, and I put myself in this category because I'm a baby. If one does not have a full command of Aramaic, they can't understand the Gemara or the Talmud. If one does not have a full linguistic understanding of Hebrew, then they cannot fully understand the Torah. I mean, even though these things are put into English, it's a bastardization of what is meant to understand. But because, of course, there's so many Jews that are scattered all around the world, we all speak different languages. There's certain things that we know for sure because we're taught these languages. So, excuse me. So I don't understand. I don't understand what he's teaching, who he's giving anything over to. Because I've had conversations with that gentleman. It's as they say in England, it's a wee bit shaky. So it seems as if that there's a lot of reforming that's going on for the sake of understanding within oneself, as opposed to saying, if I don't agree with it, if I don't understand it, I got to struggle with it until I do get it. Because at the end of the day, this thing is older than all of us put together, and so we don't have a right to come in and to reform it and reframe it to make it what's comfortable in understanding to us. So I think that once we get that out the way, then there's a lot of things that we'll see that are clear and don't cause confusion.
Gotcha. I hear you. And the thing about it is, I think from the perspective where he's coming from, is the fact that just like how you have different sects or groups under what you call Judaism right now, having their own halakha. So you have the Karaite, right? You have the the Orthodox, and then you also have what they call Reformed Judaism as well. You have the Mizraim Jews, you have the Sephardic Jews, so. And based off of these different groups, they form their own halakha as well. Now, based off of that, I think from Divine Prospect, perspective, he's not saying we're trying to, stop.
Brought up his name, Divine Prospect. That gentleman is in question when it comes to Hebraic.
And then you also have, what they call Reformed Judaism as well. You have the Mizraim Jews, you have the Sephardic Jews, so, and based off of these different groups, they form their own halakha as well. Now, based off of that, I think from Divine Prospect, perspective, he's not saying we're trying to, stop how you are doing or you are performing your own halakha or how you are, making your own process. No, but he's saying, but you can allow us to also form ours as well. So, and I think from the perspective that he comes as well, we can see that what you call as a religion, and to a large extent. To a large extent, I'm not saying to a certain extent. I'm not saying completely, but at what you call a religion and everything is still culture to a lot of those who hold on to the understanding of them being Israelites. Descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Dwelling in Africa as well. So, and when you look into all these things and knowing how they actually came up, practicing these things um, as culture. Okay, so what his perspective is coming back and trying to reconstruct some of these things, knowing that what these people are practicing is not from Second Temple Judaism or anything. So we can understand that most of these things is coming as a result of pre-exilic, practices that have stayed in particular cultures all the way till now. And so coming back and reconstructing these things and having an understanding of who you are, he's saying we can also form our own halakha as well. And we're not saying that you can't do yours, but I'm saying we can actually come together and based off the Torah and everything, come up with our own halakha. And I don't think there's I don't think there's any contention here. So that's what I'm trying to actually bring up here. I don't see a contention, because whenever I see Divine Prospect talking everything, I don't see that. All right. So when he comes back, you can ask him these questions as well. I don't know if you've actually spoken with him.
I've spoken with him at length. Okay. He's presented this argument to me before. Okay. And what I'm saying is that one does not have the right, regardless as to how learned they may feel that they are, to go ahead and to do those things, because we have halakha. Halakha applies to everybody. And just the short of it is, people choose to do what they want to do, and they choose to do, and they also choose not to do certain things, which is why you have divisions like Reform Judaism. Why is it called Reform Judaism? Because they actively tried to reform Judaism. For those of us that adhere to Christianity, that was the first major reform movement, which was based on like cult activity. And very, 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 very quick example. It's well known, and it's a law, that you are not allowed to consume blood from meat. So that means that it has to be koshered, slaughtered a certain way, salted, soaked, all of that. But for some people, they take it a step further, which is what's called a chumrah. Like, for instance, what I do is I take my meat, because the Judaism that I hold comes from Teman, comes from Yemen. And before you eat your meat, you're either supposed to put it over fire on both sides to make sure that everything is sealed so that you can consume that flesh without eating any blood. So everything, once it's been put over fire, everything that's sealed off and locked in, you're good to go. But everything that runs out, if you haven't done that, consists of you eating blood. So there's certain people that hold to that chumrah, which is a safety measure, and there's certain people who don't. Does that mean that if you don't, what's called halita, that's what it's called, halita. If you don't halita your meat, are you committing a sin? No, you're not. It's just a chumrah that people are putting up just to make sure that they're not doing something. So I think that there's a confusion. And again, this goes with those of us who are not, I don't mean to sound brash, but those of us who are outsiders looking in. You got to understand that the law is the law. The law cannot be changed, but there are things that are added to the law to make sure that you don't make any transgressions. And those things are not you reforming halakha, that's you strengthening it to make sure that's not violated so that it can be passed on as it should be in its entirety.
So in other words, you're saying that it's not a problem like, the Reform Judaism, right? Because they're still...
No, sir. Reform Judaism is a major problem because they believe that you can have sex before marriage. Gotcha. They believe that it's okay for you to masturbate, that it's okay for you to eat unkosher food. Mm-hmm. They're basically Christians. That's what they are. And when you allow these things to happen, then it's just absolutely nothing. That's like somebody saying, oh, well, that big red octagon that says stop in English, to me just means yield. Well, it can mean that to you, but when you run that stop sign, God forbid, and you get hurt, you can't then be like, oh, I'm gonna take you to court because you ran the stop, because you ran the stop sign.
So I hear you. And but the same way, just like what you're saying now, and I agree with you. Like I agree with you what you're saying about the things about Reform Judaism and everything. But if there was a Reformed Jew that was actually on stage right now, he will want to disagree with you and he will want to go back and forth with you. However, in Judaism, as we see right now, Reform Judaism is accepted, whether you like it or not, in Judaism. So, but what I'm saying, I'm not even, so that's, what I believe that, Devon is also, trying to portray is that he's not trying to be accepted within that Judaism auspices. He's not trying to be accepted there. So we're saying that we're not fighting. We're not saying we want to even take your land or anything. He's saying that we should be able to, wherever we are, in whatever space that we decide to live or dwell as an autonomous community, form our own halakha, without any disturbance. I think
So,
that's where he's
so
coming
that
from.
puts a person in what's called harem. And harem means that you are not allowed to be counted in a minyan, nor are you allowed to be able to do anything that requires your presence because you're not going along with what the law says, and that means that you are a problem.
So, and like I said, and like I said,
Go ahead.
like I said,
Go ahead.
and like I said, I agree. We're not asking to be accepted in that auspices. So it doesn't really matter. Decision is being made from there. You see, so nobody's trying to be accepted. Like it's um, any kind of acceptance from that auspices. So even if you decide and say, okay, yeah, this is how we are going to be called from and everything, it won't really matter. It won't really matter
So why
because
not just start your own religion?
so like I said, it's not necessarily a religion. It's not a religion. We're not looking at it as a religion. We're looking at it as a culture. It's a culture. And within that culture has a form of spirituality, a form of how, for lack of a better word, I don't want to, I don't want to go into it because you might think that because I use this word, I'm not using it in a negative light.
I'm listening. Go ahead. I'm listening to you.
Yeah. So a form of able to divine or a divination, with our patron deity. The process of worship, the process of so each culture, this culture that we're trying to reconstruct and everything has its spiritual, practice, not just the spiritual practice, it's everything intertwined, how we live, how we,
So what's the problem with, not saying you have that problem, but what's the problem with following the example that has been divinely given and uncorrupted?
So whatever example that we hold on to, we hold on to the that's in the Torah. So we don't have any problem with whatever example that's in the Torah that we understand.
You cut off halfway.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? So I'm saying that we're not trying to, whatever example that's in the Torah, we're ready to follow. So that's, so if any group or any sect decides to have a particular way that they do things and it's still in line with the Torah and everything that we understand, of course we're going to follow it because it's in the Torah. So we don't have any problem that the example that we have is the example that our ancestors actually gave through in the Torah that we hold on to. And that's
so what happens in the event that somebody sees that the way that somebody may choose to do something is wrong? They go to a higher source, get that information, and then bring that information back to this fringe group, and that fringe group ostracizes said person for finding out this extra information or for even going to those people.
So, like I said, any information or anything that will come, it's, if you call it fringe, that's relative, and how you call it fringe or whatever source that you say you get from a higher source, that's relative. It's relative. So whenever community decides to come together under this auspices, and we build our own community, autonomous community, where we have our elders, where we have, our priests and our teachers, and we have all different aspects of the community functioning, it'll go through that process. And if it goes through that process, whatever decision that is made at the end of the day is what holds. So if you say that you're coming and you're getting an information from a higher source, that's relative. If it's accepted from within the community that it's a higher source, it will be accepted. If it's not, then it won't. But it's going to go through the process that will be, organized or set up based off of the understanding that we have from the Torah.
Isn't that in the Torah itself what you're saying?
Exactly. What I just said, right, is in the Torah.
Yeah, because
exactly.
You see.
I'm just, you're absolutely correct, Gadal, and that's why I'm just actually putting it that way. Go ahead, Gadal. Go
ahead. In Deuteronomy 17, when you set up judges, the leaders of the people, if there be a matter that's too hard, that's like you can't really get the full understanding of what's written in the Torah, you go to the judges or the leaders of the community, and they make a decision, and whatever decision they make for the community, that is to be treated as law. The communities, what we need as Israelites in America, we need these laws and our leaders to come together and form our own, halakha, because we're in America. We're not in Jerusalem. We're not living in that time period where those elders in that community came up with their laws. We need our own separate for our way of life here that works for us. And I totally support this, man, and I hope we could further that conversation.
But see, when you brought up that parashat, this is from Yitro. That was I think last week or 2 weeks ago. When you bring that up with the decipherings, they're deciphering based upon the law that we cannot divert from. How do we solve this case? It's not them developing their own understanding of the law. It's them saying this is the law, but this is the case that was presented. So within the matter of that law, not sharing to the left or to the right, how do we find what's proper? But that's not making up something new. It's finding an understanding as to what needs to be executed within the paradigm. You can't go outside the box.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I maybe said it in a way you couldn't understand, but yeah, the Torah, like the brother said, what we have, the Torah is the foundation. You're not making nothing new. You're not making anything, but based on where we're at and where we are as a people, is decisions and that elders have to make that draws upon the law that applies here. Right, the same way when you got the Babylon Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud. One was for how they would do it in Babylon, and one was for how they do it in Jerusalem, right? So we need one for here, but it's always the Torah is the foundation. But how do we apply this as Israelites in this land?
Right, but that's not the correct use of the Talmud, Yerushalmi or Bavli. It was just the people who were. Those are just the names of. Excuse me. That was just the place where that information was gathered, and those were the Chachamim that were in that place at that time. All of them were operating upon the same law. A different set of halachot, which are set up for people that live in America or Jews in Papua New Guinea or Puerto Rico, so on and so forth, because it's all the same. The only thing that one I would have to say is obligated from is whatever mitzvot are makom based. Like you can't observe Shemitah outside of Eretz Israel because Shemitah is only for in Israel. So that's an understanding. One can't there, but everything else is not subject up to interpretation. It still needs to be executed.
No, I agree. Like it's not like the Babylonian Talmud or Jerusalem Talmud. The law, it's the same law. And what Divine is talking about, yes, it's going to be based off the same law, but how do we do this in this time period, in this land, in the of us, the black so-called black Hebrew Israelites in America? How do we have our own where we can our own halakha, but still based off the same law that we can do it in this land? That's all that's being said.
Why is something trying to be redone that already exists? regardless as to where a Jew is, find laws for the exception of things that have to deal with the land if they're not in the land. And it is your duty to do everything in your power to get to the land so you can observe everything as a whole. You don't need to make up anything extra just because you live in America. It's a fruitless endeavor, and honestly it's just asinine.
Because
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, because one, we don't strive to assimilate into, that community. We would have to convert and try to be accepted. Hold on,
you broke up, and I just wanted to
okay. Yeah, because we don't care or want to assimilate to that community. We have to convert, be looked down on. It's just a whole lot of stuff that you have to face and go through that. We're not going to put ourselves through that to be accepted to nobody. We can do this ourselves with our Torah, where we're at in our community, and we're not looking for acceptance from nobody else.
But Judaism is communal. So how do you know that you would have to convert and you would be looked down? How do you know that?
All right, so let me ask you a question, right? And this is hypothetical. Me, if I wanted to go be accepted by that community, what would I have to do?
Which community are you referring? Are you referring to the state as a whole?
Yeah, the orthodoxy, whatever you follow. Would I have to convert and be babysat and do all this stuff just to be accepted into that community?
It depends upon your status right now. I mean, if you're born of a
just
Jewish
say
mother,
yes, you know it. Come on.
If you I'm not going to do that, because that's not answering your question, and it's not that cut and dry. It totally depends upon your personal status. If you're born of a Jewish mother, you have your birth certificate, you have your parents' ketubah, you're good. But if you just come over and you're like, oh, well, I feel this and I know that, and this is what the scripture says, they're going to be like, okay, just go sit over there. And we saw that happen in the 60s when people came from Chicago and from Detroit in mass from the African American community, and they came to the state under the right of return. And they said, well, are you guys Jews? And they said, no, we're not Jews. We're Hebrew Israelites. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so after a laborious explanation, everybody had to sit down. But then they were eventually let in. They moved to where they wanted to go. And the rabbinical authorities came and oversaw what they were doing just to see what was going on. Because everybody says that they're Jewish just to come here. A lot of these people are missionaries, a lot of them are idol worshippers, so on and so forth. But they saw them and they said, look, everything that you guys are doing is exactly like it's on par. But if you are 3 or 4 generations removed, then there's what's called a suffix or a doubt. And this applies to everybody, black, white, Chinese, Russian, whoever. And so they were like, well, just to make sure that there's no problems for this community now, no problems for the future, we're going to suggest that you all go through what is called a gior lechumra. And they openly just said, we don't want to do that. So just simply for the sake of pride, they were denied what was theirs. And it's not until here recently, until now, that a lot of the people in the community are waking up and saying the fault of our grandfathers and our grandmothers of pride is stopping us from being able to live our lives here. So a lot of them are having to redo that work simply because folks said, this is what we feel, this is what we believe, and just didn't, follow the protocol. There's protocols everywhere you go, and if you don't follow it and certain things happen to you, you have nobody to blame but yourself.
I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, me and other people that maybe feel like me, I don't care to even go through the process, even think about conversion. I don't care to be accepted by that, right? So when Divine Prospect get to talking about us as Black Israelites, whatever you want to call it, Black Jews in America, forming our own helicopter of how to keep the Torah or the laws here in this land for our people, I'm 100% with it. I don't care. I don't care if the whatever you want to call them don't accept it. It's not. I don't want to be accepted by them. So I'm for Divine. I don't know if you're here, but man, I support it. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I hear you, Goodall. Because Captain, go ahead.
Hey, I appreciate it, Pastor. What I was gonna say is I'd rather deal with prospects proposal than any other nation where you got to go through so much. And even if you think about what the brother brought about going over to Demona, look at what they had to go through. And even after they went through all of that and gave their lives, sacrificed their kids, submitted to everything that the so-called Jewish man said, I think it was like last year, they still was in danger of getting evicted just because they wanted to. So you want to put your put your life in the hands of your oppressor when that's not necessary. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah don't say put your life in the hands of another enemy. It says put your life in your own hands. So if black people are going to do anything, I'd rather deal with them than to deal with another nation. That's all I wanted to add, Prosper.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you gotta remember, a lot of those individuals in Demona served in the IDF. You didn't give.
That's a law. They got to give up their kids.
Yeah. So you didn't give your youth to doing this, and yet they're gonna say, oh, because of discrepancy, yeah, we're gonna ship you back. So I'd rather stay here or amongst our own. And how about we do our own militant thing? If we're going to do something to defend our own immediate community and protect ourselves, I'd rather contribute to that. Matter of fact, this is one thing that I do appreciate about ISBK, right? These brothers have a whole training that they go through. And maybe you could speak on that, Captain, where I think that if we're going to do something, might as well be for our own community that we can immediately protect and support if we're going to do anything militant, as opposed to serving a state that at any time can discriminate against you.
You want to speak on that, Cap? Did you ever see before I speak on that, did you ever see the videos of the families that were complaining? I remember when it first came out, I played it on the radio show. If I could find it, maybe I'll play it this week. Of the families, they're pleading. They're saying, we gave up our kids. We did everything you asked for, and y'all still, putting us out. Like, that's some horrific shit to have to go through. After they've been over there since the 60s, and then their family can't even stay there, their kids. And I remember when I was over there, a couple of brothers I know, they talk about how their kids join the military. Hey, that's what you got to do. That's what they say. And then you do all of that, and then you're told you can't. From what we do and what we practice, we do train. We call it Hebrew Academy, where we train for self-defense, for protection. It's primarily about self-defense. It's not about attacking anything, but it's primarily about self-defense, how to discipline yourself, because that's the one thing that you can do. A lot of times when y'all see us at camp and y'all see we're not attacking nobody, because we are a self-defense unit, not a, just attack unnecessarily. So we do have the tools in place to do that. We also have other tools like that have land and know how to cultivate land. So there's things that, we do have as well.
And that immediately impacts our community. So we reap all the benefits from getting involved in that, as opposed to serving a state where any time can turn their back on you. Right. And that's why
don't you serve a state now? Don't you pay taxes, and don't you, all of that?
But that's different than serving the military. That's actually optional. It's not mandated.
Okay, well, right. It's not mandated because it's not.
It's not mandated because we're not looked at as foreigners.
It's not
foreigners come over
it's not
here.
It's not mandated because that's just not the way that things go here. And I personally know the gentleman who is handling this case, and the things that are put out.
Doubt you know him. But what I do know is from history shows.
The things that are put out. Sorry, come on now. And the things that are put out, either for or against, we all should realize that it's propaganda unless you're here and you know the situation.
No problem. So I was there, spoke to them there in Demona, in Ashkelon. I was there, spoke to them directly. So I'm not speaking from third hand or propaganda or anything like that. I was there, spoke to Naor, spoke to ICL, went and sat with the elders of Demona and got the whole thing firsthand, mouth to mouth. So I am speaking from being over there. So again, the military part is not mandatory. Even if an immigrant comes over here to America, it's not mandatory that your kids have to join their military. Nor, after you complete the process, can they just revoke it if they feel like it. So if we're going to put our hands into anything, we do it to ourselves. I've never seen that in the in the Torah, where you go to another nation to build your nation. I've never seen that. The Torah gives excellent tools and utilage in our laws, so where we stick to ourselves and use our resources for ourselves, we'd be fine. But a lot of times, the Israelites, as we find in the scriptures and in life today, they say, let's join the heathen because we haven't had it so good since we left them. I'm quoting First Maccabees 1 and 11. So that's more so what it is. So I don't think Prospect should get any brushback. If anything, if you disagree with Prospect's proposal, then form your own that deals with your own. Don't tell us to run to another.
You're speaking as an outsider and as a tourist. You don't have any equity here.
I'm not speaking as an outsider. Well, you're an outsider. You're a tourist. You would have us follow the same procedure that you chose to follow. And again, those people in Dimona, and you made a point to say they went to the land they wanted to. They did not go to the land. They did not want to go to Dimona. They wanted to go in Israel. You think they wanted to be by a nuclear power plant that they say the wind sails away from Dimona, or would they rather be away from the nuclear power plant? They'd rather be away from the nuclear power plant.
There's no power plant. There's no power plant in Dimona.
You should ask. I didn't say it was in Dimona. That's not what I said. You should be paid very.
You literally just said that.
Yes, there is.
Do you say that again, Lois?
Yes, there is a nuclear power plant in Dimona.
Thank you, but I didn't say.
Where is it?
Did they want to? 1 second. I didn't say did they want to be by the nuclear power plant. I said did they want to be by where they say the wind blows away from it? Because that's what they have to tell themselves. That's what they tell me. When I asked them, when I was there, and I asked them, why would they go by the nuclear power plant? They say, well, the wind blows away, so we don't really get the nuclear reaction. That's what you do when you subject yourself to another power. How about you just... So if you want to do that, that's fine for you. But I think a brother like Prospect that wants to build his nation shouldn't be hindered by another brother unless that brother has another proposal that involves the brothers or that nation coming together.
So let me hold on, Cap. I want to let where's the sister go? Did she leave?
Yeah, I think she left.
She left. I was gonna let her speak. So I just came in not too long ago, so I didn't really catch everything that was going on. So Ariel, what is your position? What are you stating in here?
The position is that there's nothing that needs to be reformed or remade. And I think it was Gadal who said that, the Jerusalem Talmud and the Bavli Talmud, they were made for the laws that needed to be kept in Jerusalem and in Bavel, which is not true. Everybody understands halacha. And within that framework, of course, there's certain things that a person may or may not have to do based upon the situation. The only thing that comes to mind is Shemitah. And everybody knows the laws of Shemitah. And if you're living outside the land, you cannot keep those laws just because you're not there. So it's a asinine attempt for one to then say, oh, well, I think that just because we live in America or wherever, we need to make up our own paradigm of the laws here, where it's already been laid out. And the only thing that one has to do is master Aramaic and master Hebrew so they can understand what should be done. There's no need to try to redo anything that's already been done. And it's been in existence since longer than any of us came on the scene. So we haven't the right to do so.
Okay, we don't have the right. That's interesting. So and again, I just want to let me reset the room real quick so people can understand what's coming in, what's going on, because the title does say Christians don't let zeal blind you from truth. Israelites, right? Dash Israelite, meaning this is what we're saying. So this room is primarily if Christians want to come to the stage and they want to speak. So if there's any Christian on the stage, just let me know and I'll let you speak. But now, since we did shift the topic and it's talking about something that's also, I think, is relevant amongst those of us in our community, not necessarily the Christian community, but in our community. I think you're talking about as far as whether the Bavli or the Jerusalem Talmud has preeminence, or is it something that we should acquiesce to in regards to our halakha, or should we be able to formulate our own halakha? And I'm of the position that those of us in the diaspora, and that would include you too, Ariel, because you wasn't born there, right? So those of us in the diaspora, right, our perspective of how these things should be applied, it differs from those who are responsible for formulating the Talmud, right? It's completely different, right? So I'll give you an example. Maybe you can answer this for me, Ariel, right? So when we look at the northern tribes that have been dispersed, right, due to the Assyrian Empire moving into Samaria, which was the capital, right, and they are dispersed. Did they have any hand in anything that we see formulated in the Mishnah or in the Gemara that makes up the Talmud?
Of course.
They did?
Yes. A person can't.
Okay,
A person can displace you, but they can't displace your knowledge. It's personal. It's kept.
Wait. So can you show me evidence of some of the northern tribes contributing to the Beit Din's decisions that make up the Mishnah that we have codified in 200 CE and the Gemara commentary that we have completed in 500 CE? Can you show me where northern tribes was involved in that process?
I can't, and let me tell you why. That's because I would have to know exactly what tribe these sages and these elders are from, and there's no way for you to find that out unless it's voiced by them and then recorded. So,
well, this historians that actually have done that work. I can actually send you a book if you want that actually speaks on it. There's ways that we can determine.
Are they secular historians?
There are people who are Jews that live in Israel that write from Hebrew University.
I understand that, but the question, Hebrew University, then the answer
when you say secular, what do you mean when you say secular? Somebody that's not within the Orthodox Jewish community?
No, that means that somebody that uses secular means to formulate understandings on things that are strictly rabbinic in nature. You can't apply secular thought to rabbinic literature, nor can you apply science to, I don't know, to something that is not scientific. You don't take the secular and put it into the divine. It doesn't fit. And the only reason that might fit is for someone that has their own agenda to reform something.
All right.
Reform, it's just being able to capture data and make sense out of the data from people who are insiders. So we're not talking about people who are not insiders. We're talking about people who are insiders that are using the knowledge that they've accrued in order to put it in a method so it could be received and understood by others.
So be they Jew or not, if it's secular, it doesn't register and it holds no place.
Okay, well, that may be your opinion, but that's not shared by a lot of individuals in that field who do come from your community, right? So if you don't want to look at the source, it's fine. Like you said, you don't know because, within your circle, there is obviously a limitation of knowledge in regards to the background of these individuals. Otherwise, I think you would have some insight on it. But like I'm trying to explain to you that there's data that exists that we have that's available that we can start that process. Actually has been begun. Now, we can't get everybody, but for a great amount of them that do stand out, we do have some data on their pedigree and their lineage. So if you want to ask anybody within your community, hey, we're going to the Gemara, and all these rabbis that we see here having these dialogues and discussions, whether they're expounding on the Mishnah or talking amongst themselves on something that's more divergent, do we have any oral traditions in regards to where they hail from? Most of them are from the southern tribes. Some of them have some lineage from Levi or Lewi, right? There's nobody from the northern tribes, from what we can tell from the data that exists, that contributed to that because they've been scattered. So we don't have representatives from them that are coming together and compiling this data that we all should bind ourselves to. And that's extremely important, right? Because I don't know what your position is. Do you believe that you're ethnically a Jew or you're a Jew by conversion?
Do I believe that I'm ethnically a Jew?
Yeah. Do you believe you're an ethnic Jew or do you believe you're a Jew by conversion?
What's the separation betwixt the two?
One is lineage, bloodline, and the other is through formal conversion.
Okay, so one would have to understand that formal conversion means there's no difference between the two. If you ask anybody who's learned, they will tell you there is no difference between the person who converts or the person who is naturally born. And there's also a lot of esoteric explanations we can go into, but just on the Pashut level, there is no difference between the two. So that's a irrelevant question.
It's extremely relevant, but if you don't want to acquiesce to the fact that you may be ethnically an Israelite, right? And you want to say, well, whether that's the case or not, if I'm converted, it doesn't matter. I would disagree with you on the basis of what's written in the Talmud. If you want me to start reading some of the Gemara, I can, and I can show you how that does have some preeminence in certain cases, right? Maybe not for everything, but in certain cases it does. Do you have your Talmud in front of you?
No, I do not. But even before you go into that,
okay,
it's very simple.
Okay,
it's a voluminous work.
Correct.
That takes 7 years to complete. Okay. The only portions that are the text itself are in the middle of the page, and everything on the left and right is commentary. And me myself, I'm a baby, so there's still, a lot of things that I need to learn. But if one does not have command of Aramaic, then they're not going to fully understand what it means. And even if you read something, what appears to be just flipping open the page and reading it in context, it's not in context unless you follow the full rhythm and pattern of the entire conversation.
Okay. So I understand what your position is, because that is the orthodox position in regards to it, especially as a means to deter outsiders from trying to make sense of something that is esoteric and that is only held within the community, right? You need certain tools, you need certain insights, and maybe even need to know how to unlock certain patterns and symbols to be able to decipher what's being conveyed in there, right? That's been said.
No, there's no symbols. There's no symbols.
Hold on, my brother. Yes. An idiom can be a symbol. Do you know what the definition of a symbol is? It's not always graphic. No?
I thought that was a rhetorical question. I'm sorry. I'm just listening.
Oh, no. No, that was an actual question. I said, are you aware that a symbol can be something that is not only a visual representation? Because it could be a word. Symbols can be words too.
No, I didn't know that.
It could be a statement. Okay, no problem. If you go to any English dictionary, right, and you look up the definition of symbol, it encompasses a mark, a character, a sign, or a word that indicates or signifies or is understood as representing an idea, object, or relationship, right? They can also be tokenization of terms that can be placed in symbol form. So, for example, in masonry, right, and speculative and operative masonry, right, if I say a particular phrase, that's considered a token or a symbol, right? So that's a way that I communicate with you, Ariel, that everybody else in this room would not know what we're talking about. So I'm using symbols, words, to describe certain things that they who are uninitiated will not understand. And there's a reason why it's like that. Matter of fact, the Talmud is what kept the Jews from being fully persecuted and converted by Christians. This is why Christians hate the Talmud, right? So history explains why the approach that you're taking now, right, who your reverberation of the elders that are in your community and the things that they receive from their elders, that they had to be very exact, and how you contain the wealth of knowledge and how you handle sensibly what's contained in the Talmud, because what's in there is what's kept the Jews bound together and as a community for hundreds of years, even in the face of adversity and persecution. So I understand why it's a sensitive topic for you, and why you have to say, unless you have a thorough command of Aramaic. Well, Aramaic is not difficult to learn now. Mishnaic Hebrew is not difficult to learn now. I took 2 classes in Mishnaic Hebrew. As far as Aramaic, I'm not as well versed in Aramaic. I'm getting there. I'm working on it. Takes some time, right? But as far as Mishnaic Hebrew, because I have a command of biblical Hebrew, I understand Mishnaic Hebrew. But when it comes to Aramaic, I would need that to start to read a lot of the Gemara commentary, right? And some of it, guess what we have today? We have interlinears. We have tools that can actually do the work for us, even if you lack that knowledge and understanding. Now, again, the insight, because maybe you're talking about the shot level, right? But the insight that you get when you get a little bit deeper, these are things that have been laid on purposely to confound the uninitiated, so that way they cannot extract the symbols, the statements, and or the conveyance of the esoteric parts of it that have given the wisdom to the sages over the years. You can't just come into our Talmud and think you can figure it out, when we put years and years and ancestors upon ancestors have studied this thing, have mastered it, and found things deeper than what you get in the secular realm. So of course, I understand why you hold that position. It's not a secret, right? If you research history and know people in those circles, this is what they convey to you. right? But what I'm saying is this, and again, we don't agree on that, and I'm okay with you not agreeing with that. Once you understand the principles of halakha, right, you can apply it outside of the codification of those various works of halakha that exist within the Orthodox Jewish community.
But why would one do that?
Because a lot of the things that apply in that field does not apply to us here in America. Now, do you want specific examples? And I can kind of explain what those mean, right? Here's a great example, right? Let me just ask you a question to see if maybe you understand it. Because recently I've shared this information for people who probably don't know. When we look at the enumeration of 613 as it pertains to the statutes, laws, or commandments, or whatever, right? What is that derived from? Is that a strict codification and categorization of all of the statute, laws, and commandments that's in the mitzvot? Is that what that is? Or is that based entirely on something else that is unrelated?
Something else.
Oh, thank you. But I'm asking Ariel. So Ariel, do you have an answer for us?
Yes, Yahokim is right. It's something else.
Okay. So it's based on what? What are the two things it's based on? Actually, three things it's based on.
Go ahead. You can tell me.
Okay. So you're familiar with gematria, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you practice gematria? Like, do you use numerology to decipher things?
Not at this moment. No, I don't.
Okay,
not unless it's like necessary. I don't go on my way to do it just yet.
Yeah, no problem. But do you think that system is necessary to interpret parts of the Talmud or even the written Torah?
Necessary? No.
Okay, but it's mentioned in the Talmud. So in Talmud Makot 23b, and starting at about verse 18, right? I'm gonna read this to you. I'm gonna read it in English because everybody here doesn't know Mishnah Hebrew, but there's a part in it that you want me to go back into the Mishnah Hebrew and bring out. I will, right? Because I have the Safaria.org app in front of me too. And it's for anybody. Anybody wants to follow this, go to www.safaria.org. And when you go on that website, you can type in Makot, which is Makkot. That's the transliteration in English. 23b, and it will take you here. And we're going to see how this was formed. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in order for me to, in exile, right? We're in exile. Those of us that are in diaspora, right? We're in exile, right? In order for me to make sense of what is applicable to be here, I'm not going to hold fast to that dogma because that's based on something entirely different, especially if I'm not in the land. So there would be another form of me enumerating which statutes, laws, and commandments are applicable to me based on my current geographical location. So therefore, if something is mentioned in the Talmud is tied to being in the land at a particular place and time, and that you're telling me I should bind myself to it even though it doesn't apply to me here, goes to show that line of demarcation in which I need to show a distinction between what should apply to me here as opposed to me being in the land and on the authority of the leaders that are there. So let me read it out to you. Rabbi Simlai taught there are 613 mitzvot stated to Moshe in Torah, consisting of 365 prohibitions. You've heard of that before, right? Probably familiar with that. Corresponding to what? The number of the days in the solar year. This is the earliest source of breaking down the enumeration of the mitzvot based on the solar year. Why? Well, okay, let's keep going. And 248 positive mitzvot corresponding to the number of a person's limbs. Now, for somebody says that 248 is supposed to be correspond to the amount of limbs that we have, you got to do a little more research in anatomy. But that's another conversation altogether. I'm not going to get into that, right? So it says, Rab Hamuna said, what is the verse that alludes to this? It is written, Moses commanded to us the Torah, an inheritance of the congregation of Yaakov, in Devarim 33 and 4. The word Torah, in terms of its numerical value, going into gematria, is 611, the number of mitzvot that was received and taught by Moshe, our teacher. In addition, there are two mitzvot. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me, Shemot, or Exodus 20, verses 2 and 3, the first two of the 10 commandments that we heard from the mouth of the Almighty for a total of 613. Now, what's interesting is that we have the conjunctive vav in Shemot 22 and 3, which links two clauses, which meaning that it's the same. However, they break it down and say it's 2. But it's okay. Let's say it is 2. I'll acquiesce to that. Now, looking at this formula that derives a system that comes from the Talmud and just later expounded upon by other European sages on what this enumeration system is, it's not founded on anything that's applicable to us here in America. Because even, let's say, the 613 does apply to those in the land, we're not in the land. And if you're deriving it based on a person's limbs and the solar year, and then you have to add an additional 2 to it, because remember, there's 2 rabbis. One rabbi, Rabbi Simlai, he had stated A, B, and C. But then you have another rabbi that comes behind him and says, hey, let me explain what he meant. And then he starts to break it down, and then he comes up short 2 commandments. So he splits Shemot 22 and 3 to make up the 613. But they tell you what it's derived on. So what I'm saying is, we don't have no need for that. That's the first thing. There's no need for that. But if it helps brothers and sisters in colloquial conversation, trying to convey things about the mitzvah, okay, that's fine. You could use that. Because if you even look at the numeration and how it's categorized, they repeat. Certain commands repeat. But they still keep it as a number because they have to hold to the dogma. So they keep it even though it repeats. Some of them are the exact same verbiage, but they keep it. Because if not, you're not going to get 613. Number 2, are you aware that there are loan words, like from Greek, that is found in the Talmud? That's to me, that was fascinating when I found that out. Even in the Mishnah, there are loan words.
Yes,
So if this is something that's inspired by God, the God of Israel, if he inspired this, then why is there no preservation in regards to the verbiage in the Mishnah, in the Gemara? Why are they using loan words and phrases from other cultures?
Are you familiar with phylacteries?
Of course I am.
Okay, so what is phylactery?
Phylactery is a headdress that you wear, and that contains the commandments of God.
Right, and what are they also called?
A talit?
No, phylacteries are tefillin.
Oh, excuse me, tefillin. I'm sorry. Talit is your prayer shawl. The tefillin, you're right.
Right.
So
and
what does that have to do with what I said?
Phylactery is a Grecian term. Also,
correct.
You're allowed to write a Torah scroll in Greek. You're allowed to.
And now tell me why you're allowed to do that.
You're allowed to do it for the Grecian Jews that do not have proper command of the Hebrew language. But because Ezra HaSofer wrote something that everybody could, that even a child could understand, that can be related orally, that took care of that. That took care of that issue. I had another question, but I'll let you.
Wait. Let me address that, and then definitely if you have another question. So you said phylacteries, which we know is a Greek word. If we go to the Septuagint, we actually see what the original word is. This is a transliteration into the Hebrew for phylactery, but they maintain that word because it goes back to a source. Typically, when you don't have a native Hebrew word or Aramaic word for something, then typically the source comes from something else. So in this case, that custom came from the conversion to Hellenism, where we started to adopt words from another culture to describe things that now have become part of our custom, right? Because otherwise, you would have an Aramaic or Hebrew word for it. There's no excuse why one shouldn't exist unless the source of it comes to the time when we were Hellenized, during that period of time when we was under Grecian authority or rule, or maybe even during the Hasmonean dynasty, right? So you would agree that custom is not something that is ancient.
I wouldn't agree. I would say that it is an ancient custom. And also there's something you said that stuck out. You made reference to you said, I guess you said European sages. There were no European sages at the time of the Gemara or the Talmud. All of these
No. That was in Babylon. I'm talking about after the closing of the Talmud in 500 CE. By the time we get to the late Middle Ages, early medieval period, there are European sages and rabbis. What are you talking about?
So what is your...
Because of Islam. Islam spread in those regions and forced a lot of people.
Understood. I get you. So what was your purpose in mentioning the fact that they were European? That still doesn't take the fact.
Listen, I'm gonna answer. Because of the geographical region that they're in, relating to or explaining and or doing their own categorization of the Torah, right?
And see that's the mistake. That's the mistake there. There was no categorization because they're European sages. That just happened to be the place where they were.
Okay.
They didn't change
But when I
anything
say
because
European, I live in America. I'm considered an African American. I'm considered American. Even though my ethnicity is not indigenous to this region, I'm considered an African American. I was born here. Those sages that we're talking about, they were born in Europe. I didn't say that they were European in the sense of stock or ethnicity. I'm saying based on the geographical region in which they are, a lot of the teachings and sayings and things that they were speaking about were things that was based on what was going on in their community. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, the Rucha Shahu, right? That particular writing was written by a Sephardic Jew, right? And what was one of the things he was trying
did you
to
just say the Shulchan Aruch? Is that what you meant? Okay.
Yes, my brother. The Shulchan Aruch. What I'm saying is, what was the purpose of him writing, a Sephardic Jew, writing that work? What was he addressing?
It's just basic halakha, so everybody's on the same page.
But why? That's the key word you said. So they're on the same page. But why? Why?
Because we had been dispersed, and with certain pieces of information that are either hard to get or maybe have been lost in oral transmission. There's somebody who knows it and who's remembered, so they wrote it down.
So that means that between various groups, let's say these are Sephardim and Ashkenazim in this case, their minhagim, their customs, right, and their halakha had major differences. Not everything, but in certain areas, there were some major differences, so a harmonization had to take place. But even to today, there's still differences. So who can say, well, no, this should be preeminent and this should be preeminent? Because even
there's not a difference in see, this is what people don't understand, and I believe that they don't understand this purposely because they don't want to understand it. There's not, like me, I'm Nusach Teman from Yemen. There's no difference between the halakha of myself or the halakha of a gentleman who may be from Sfard or maybe from, Poland. The only thing that's different are the humrot around it. And I can give an example to that when you're done.
Okay, good. And I was going to make a statement on that. And I would disagree with that. And again, I don't know if we have the liberty of time, because I know my family will be home soon, so you probably hear my kids in the background and everything. But I would love to start a separate room with you and go over that. I have tons of examples that can demonstrate that for you. But see, this is so I'm going to use data from within those communities, since you don't want to acquiesce to any secular sources, right? So I'm going to use data from within those communities where they actually speak about what those differences are, right? And then what I want to show you is a lot of those differences is based on the lands in which they live. To the point where their customs started to dictate or fill in the blanks for over time. So the argument that I'm making is, being that we're here in a diaspora in America, the same way that they naturally started to develop from a common source that they once all had, normally started to develop things based on their environment, because the theocracy of the mitzvot was based on the establishing this in a particular area, a particular place. Once you're removed from that place or from that area, now those principles or those mitzvot have to turn into principles that can be applied somewhere else, because a lot of things are not going to be in the region that you are sent to or scattered to the way it is in Israel. There's going to be some differences. For example, proximity to water, bodies of water, a river, or the Mediterranean Sea, right? Highlands and lowlands in certain locations and locales, access to certain foods, right? Even the staple crops that's used for our hagim, our feast, is going to be different if you're in a different land. If you want to maintain it. So the point I'm trying to make, my brother, is some of the things that we started to see that happen when certain groups are separated from each other, we started to see distinct differences started to develop, because they're taking principles that they all shared at one point and applying it based on the region in which they live. And what I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with doing that. And that's why I said that we also can do the same here in our diaspora.
That was made out of necessity, because I'm pretty sure it would take anybody a full calendar year just
He's
to
still eating. I ripped it up in pieces for him.
No, keep going, Ariel.
Yeah, he's just chilling, eating, dancing while he's eating. He's hungry, man. Yeah,
all of that is. We got to mute. Y'all, what's up? Y'all, what's up? I got to mute it. Go ahead.
All of that is done out of necessity, because those people could not come here. It takes you a full calendar year to get here, and a lot of people died on the trip. But now it's just a matter of you jumping on the plane. So it seems as if that the legitimacy under which you're working is a self-imposed exile. That seems like the core of your validation.
I had to step away for a second. I'm gonna let Emmanuel and Gadal, they'll take over. I'll be back.
I'm not sure if you heard what I said, but I'm pretty sure the rest of y'all heard it.
No, go ahead. Say it again.
I said the basis is a self-imposed exile. You can be here in a matter of 13 hours. You can operate with whatever autonomy that you're operating with now in whatever state or wherever you may be. You have a choice to do that here. But along with that choice, be it America, Alaska, or wherever, that choice also comes with consequences. You can do as you see fit. That's why God gave us all free will. But at that same time, you're going to have to be the subject of the free will that you choose. Because he said, oh, we're in exile, we're separated, we're in exile, we're separated. That's by your choosing. Nobody is stopping you from coming here. There's no invisible bully. There's no boogeyman. There's nothing stopping you. You can come here and then smash all of that.
But I don't think you're trying to understand.
No,
I understand.
Right? I understand what you.
Let me just say.
I'm sorry.
Let me just finish, right? Yeah, it's cool. To come there, to try to go and partake in that, we would have to we would have to submit to the people over there authority and what they set up and what they established, what they created, what they rules. And let's say they are, to just say they are, right? The other part of the nation, the northern kingdom,
they are what?
Say they are Jews, the true Israel. Just say it. We would have to assimilate to their way of life. When the northern kingdom or whoever the dispersed, we had no say in what was set up over there. So what Divine is saying, why don't we don't care that we don't want to be accepted with them. Let's come up with our own community, our own traditions, and we follow it here and not care to be accepted with them. And I agree with that and I support that. If you want to go over there and submit and be accepted and go through that with them, that's fine. That's your thing. But us, we don't want to do that. We're going to set up our own community, our own halakha, and our own traditions that we follow and we hold ourselves accountable to with our leaders and with our elders. That's what we want to do. And that's what Divine is saying, and I support it.
So why don't you just call it what it is, which is starting a new religion, which is based upon fundamentalistic Judaism, but the type of fundamentalistic Judaism that works for you.
It is not starting a new religion. It's the dispersed children that's not gathered back by the Most High God, doing what they have to do in their dispersed area, just like in the book of Zechariah. I've been talking about this a lot lately. In the book of Zechariah, those that was in Babylon, they set up their fast and how they connected with God. But it was people, Israelites that wasn't in Babylon, that wasn't doing that because they wasn't there to set up that. So we're here where we're at, and we have to set up our own stuff until the time come where the Most High gathers us all back to the land and the Most High establishes what needs to be established. That's the point.
That time is now. Did everybody leave Babylon? Yes or no?
At what time period?
During the time of Cyrus the Great and Ezra Hasopher, did everybody leave Babylon? Yes or no?
No, because you still had people in Babylon even when you get into the Second Temple time.
And why did they not leave Babylon?
They just didn't leave. I'm not sure why. Because
it was a self-imposed exile, simply because they did not want to. They didn't want to. Cyrus, as foolish as he was, thought that he was giving us permission to build the Beit Hamikdash. He wasn't giving anybody permission to do anything. And because people thought that he had given them permission, there was a major issue that happened when we came back. We built it, and we built a portion of it dedicated to him. because of how people felt. And again, I hear everything that's being said, and it just does not make any sense. You can come here and you can operate within whatever autonomy you choose, because whatever oppressive hand in all of this, it doesn't sound like it is victim mentality. And that victim, and hold on 1 second. Let me finish. And that victim mentality is what has been expressed to me is the reason why we need to make up our own this and our own that. But why not? And again, I just said beating a dead horse. Why not use what's already in place? So if you don't want to submit to it physically, you'll submit to it that's on paper, and then you'll make up something of your own in exile when you can come back of your own choosing, and you can even leave of your own choosing. But the reason you don't want to is because you think, you don't know, because I don't know, maybe you've been here, maybe you haven't, but you think based upon scare tactics that you'll be subjugated to do something that you don't want to do.
Again, you can do that, but you keep saying just come back. We don't want to submit to what they established, what they installed, which is according to the prophecy is not even a time to do it.
Who is this they that you're referring to?
The temple.
They?
You know who you know who I'm referring to, and I don't try to do
Make
that.
It plain.
You know who I'm referring
Make
to.
It plain.
Just relax. You know who I'm referring to, right?
Plain.
We don't.
You gotta talk to
you know who I'm
you
referring
gotta talk
to.
to me like
just
I'm
stop.
stupid. Make it plain.
I'm not. I'm not going to talk to you like you're stupid. Just relax.
Make it plain.
Stop. You know what I'm talking about, but you're just you want me to say certain words to get certain reactions, and I'm not going to do it. You know what I'm talking about, though. Right? So we don't want to
assume, but I don't know. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
Do y'all know who I'm talking about on the stage? When I say they
He trying to
over
get
there.
your account clip, bro.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what he's trying to
do. Hey, excuse me. Can I comment, please?
Yeah, let Gadal finish his.
I lost my train of thought. I lost it. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. My brother, can I address something? You're amazing.
You kind of low, word. You kind of low. Yeah, it's a lot better.